Today we have Jeremy Heath with us to discuss the power and importance of stories. Would it be fair to say that you are an aspiring writer and poet?
Always.
So I was actually hoping that you would be the one that came to agree to do this, because you're the only actual person that I know besides myself that writes, and the only poet I know. So I figured
shucks.
That'd be good.
No, I saw the Facebook post, and I figured I'd had to rush to message you so that we could actually sit down and do it. I know with the story aspect, I might have a little input, but it's really been a while since I've been able to sit down and go through, like when I was at UE, discussing all the different aspects of stories. So I'm at your disposal, though.
Yeah, well, like you just talked about at UE, so you have a bit of a background in a academic sense of stories, in a way.
Yeah, I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Creative Writing from the University of Evansville. I was going to follow it up with a higher degree somewhere else, but, family happens.
Right, so. Yeah. All right, well, before you got into college, how engrossed in stories and writing and whatnot were you?
It was 50-50. Mostly I read. Me and my siblings, we went with my grandparents every summer, and they went all over Hell's Half Acre. Spent most of the time traveling on the highways and in the South. So to pass the time, I read. And after a while, once you read through everything, you start making up your own stories. And when I was in high school, one of my best friends, he would constantly be writing. So, after a while, I got more into it, and here we are.
Yeah, and throughout your childhood, because you read a lot, well, and movies too, if you're a movie person, can you remember at any point if there was a single or a few stories that really had an impact on you or helped you, see things a different way, change your beliefs, shape your beliefs, or anything like that?
Well, I think all of them in some way stay with you. None of them, especially when you're a kid. Have you ever seen the movie You've Got Mail? Tom Hanks
remember. Okay. Well, now you say Tom Hanks, I might have.
Yeah, it's Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan, bookstore, a little rivalry. It's a cheesy rom-com, but I love the movie. And in it, Meg Ryan, her character is named Kathleen Kelly. She says that the books you read is when you're children, they become a part of your identity more than anything else you read in the rest of your life. And I'm paraphrasing; it's not the exact quote, and it's true. When we were younger, we would read things like the King Arthur stories, and you'd have kids running around pretending they were knights. I would almost say that's kind of the degradation that we're kind of seeing now. Most kids are, playing on the computer screens and watching TV. They don't have their nose in the books like we did when we were kids. So instead of enacting all the things that we're reading and dreaming about all these different things, Treasure Island, you're out there swashbuckling. Nowadays you're watching people play on Fortnite.
That's true. Well, because you mentioned video games too, because in the past, before we had all the online gaming, video games were still, in my experience anyway, a very good outlet for telling stories as well.
It's true. But I think the downside is the more developed these games get, and don't get me wrong, I'm not video game bashing. I love to get lost in a good video game. If it becomes all that you're doing, there's no imagination in it. You can sit down, pick up any book off the bookshelf, and you're reading through it. You're playing it through in your mind.
Yeah.
And you can get a sense of, it's just like with movies, you can get a sense of honor, integrity, and all that through the actions and the words of the people that are on the screen. But you're not in their mindset. But in a book, you're I keep hitting your table here. You're everywhere. You're in their mind. You're in the mind of the villain. You're seeing things that neither the villain or the heroes are seeing. you're all across the board. And I think you get a greater sense of the bigger picture than if you were just in the 30 seconds of what the movie will show you. So if you can sit down and talk to any Lord of the Rings fan, the movies, most of them will say they were great. They stayed as true as they could, trying to adapt it to film. But everything that happens in the books, I mean, you have pages and pages and pages of what it might have taken 10 seconds in the movie to show.
Right.
So it's you're going through that, and it's just compiling in your mind. And it's going to stay there. I mean, sure, the Hollywood version is glitzy and glammy, but when you read it, it impacts you a whole lot more. And then with the video games, you're going to go through 10, 30 seconds. Great. I think the best example would be the Halo series, which I think is a great example of the games are now, I mean, they've been put in a book. I think it started almost as soon as they made the games. But the books are great. So none of these mediums are solely perfect, except I think the books. You know, it's all going to come back to the books. But
well, that's true.
I could be biased.
Because even if you're talking about movies, TV shows, video games, they still have to write those things in a book-like format before they even turn them into those. Right. So it all comes back to writing.
Let me tell you, one of the things you asked, what kind of got me into it? You know, when I was a kid, if I did the writing, I would have to say I had a 7th grade English teacher. One of his assignments every single week, he'd give you a list of spelling words. Now, you couldn't just sit there and memorize the spelling words. So on Monday, he'd give you the spelling words. On Tuesday and Wednesday, he gave you enough time to write a story, and you had to incorporate all of those words. And then I think it had to be at least 500 words long. I think between 500 and 700 words minimum. And then on Thursday, you'd type it up. And on Friday, you would turn it in. He would read it in front of the class, and then everyone would talk about it. And that's one of the first times that I realized, hey, people might actually be interested in reading this stuff other than just me writing it down, throwing it in a notebook and being like, that was a great story. And then it's gone. Right. So, and his name was Mr. Gums. 7th grade, always stayed with me.
Yeah, well, since we're talking about writing in school, we have a little bit of a age difference between us.
Yeah, I'm like 90 years old.
I think it's only like 10 years.
Yeah, I'm 34.
Yeah. So I'm 26, so almost 10 years.
Yeah. I think when you were growing up, though, you got probably a lot more digital than I did.
Not necessarily, but that's probably just because of where I went to school. Probably more than you, yeah, but we didn't do a whole lot in digital. Of course, we learned typing and all of that. But when it came to English, most of our, and this may be the same, but most of our writing assignments and everything were non-fictional. And in order for me, because creative writing was a big thing for me.
Oh, yeah, those are the best parts.
Yeah.
When I was in middle school, we didn't always have the fun stuff. You know, when I was in 7th grade, I had Mr. Gums, excellent teacher. But then, of course, you move on to other teachers that are all about diagram this sentence and do this. Or, you know, you could read this story and tell us your opinion of it, but you weren't actually able to write. Of course, we had a couple teachers, they did that free journaling thing, which I hated. I can't state it enough. It was horrible. They're like, okay, open it up and just write the first thing that comes to mind. Of course, if you do write the first thing that comes to mind, and you're writing about, you know, someone getting murdered or some monster ripping some guy's head off, that they're going to talk to you about it. So you pretty soon learn, well, I'm just going to write about stuff that happens, and you can actually be creative. Yeah, they want you to be creative, but they don't really care about the actual story. It's like an exercise for them that they don't even care about.
Yeah, well, and they focus more on like the technical aspects of how things are formed and how you have to write certain things this way, and you can't put certain words at the beginning of a sentence instead of how to, we barely focused on how to detect or get the moral of the story out of what you're reading, or how, different people can take totally different morals of the story out of the same story.
Oh, yeah.
Which,
For example, you've seen Law Abiding Citizen, right? Gerard Butler, Jamie Foxx.
No.
Oh my god.
I probably missed out on a lot of great movies.
Okay, well, it's a movie where, it just seems like I'd have to lay it out. In the movie, you really empathize with Gerard Butler. His wife and daughter were raped and murdered. His daughter was a wee little gal. And he was there for it. They knocked him out. Went through the trial. The prosecutor did some sort of plea deal because he didn't think that he could go all the way through and get a conviction, and he was more worried about his conviction rate than actually getting these guys in prison. So Gerard Butler snaps, and his character goes through and systematically sets up all these little traps, and he starts wiping out who he feels are the corrupt in the leadership. And at first he goes after the guys that killed his wife and daughter, and he gets arrested, and he got bond off of his own recognizance. And when they're like, well, yeah, he's not a flight risk, and the judge is like, we're going to go ahead and set bail, he rips into the judge, calling her corrupt and whatnot, because he could go out and kill someone else. And then he gets sent into prison. Well, and I hate to do spoilers, but long story short, I'm sitting there watching this movie. I'm rooting for him all the way. One of his main things is he wants to bring the entire diseased, corrupt house down. And I'm just like, yes! And then at the end, Jamie Foxx ruins it by, I'm not going to spoil it, but a lot of people walked away with that movie being like, yeah, the good guys won. And I'm sitting there like, man, I don't think it would have played out that way. It shouldn't have played out that way. And that is a great example of someone watching something, someone reading something, and getting a completely different story out of it based off of how they read it. Maybe it was just the mindset they were in when they read it or they watched it. But we can sit down on something and see two different things.
Yeah. And, okay, so have you seen... Well, first of all, are you a Star Wars fan in any capacity?
I plead the fifth, sir.
Okay.
I'm a firm believer there's about 5 kinds of people in this world, okay? There's the Battlestar Galactica fans. There's the Star Trek fans, the Star Wars fans, the Stargate fans, and those damn dirty atheists who don't like either of them. I'm more of a Stargate fan, although Star Trek, I liked the older stuff, watching it with my granddad. Battlestar Galactica, the reboot, was amazing. Star Wars, I never really got behind it. But I digressed.
Well, how many movies have you seen?
I saw the originals.
Okay, so you haven't seen any of the new ones?
No.
But I'm sure you've heard things about them.
Yes, and so many memes, so many angry articles.
Yeah.
I almost want to watch them just so I can see what everyone's rattling about.
It's so bad. But I was going to talk about those, or use them to bring up a different version of people getting different things out of the same thing. And that was movies now, and specifically the Star Wars movies, because since you've seen the original 3, and people either came away with Darth Vader was a villain, and the story was about Luke, or that Darth Vader was the tragic hero, and it was about Vader.
I honestly think it's more about Vader, but I also come from a standpoint of I'm an Empire kind of guy. Right. It's not my favorite movie franchise, but I do have an opinion on it. I believe the Empire, after the Jedi brought it down, nothing good came from the Jedi revolt. So
right, it would have just been chaos.
Oh yeah, the Empire had law, it had order, it kept a lot of these low-life criminals to remain as low-life criminals. After everything would be fractured, I mean, you'd have warlords, entire systems would be lost to criminal gangs. I mean, the military presence can only do so much, and if they're always chasing down this band of religious fanatics with lightsabers, I mean, they can't really enforce law and order. So I think the Jedi caused a lot more deaths, destruction, sorrow than anything that the Emperor or Vader could have done.
Yeah, well, and then you got to think maybe the good outcome would have been actually Luke teaming up with Vader, because Vader wanted to take down the Emperor and rule. There's a perfect example, and that also is a perfect example of how those 3 movies and those other 3 movies had a story that people could tell, and it kind of had an important moral or whatever. I'd like to look all 6, and like I said in my last video, it's a good example of how a good person can easily slip to the dark side, but then the actual original 3, combined with that, shows the story of the road to redemption, even though you have slipped so far to the dark side. He didn't redeem himself in the eyes of all, but he redeemed himself in the eyes of the person that was most important to him, his son.
Right. Are you familiar with Joseph Campbell? He was the one that came up with the hero's journey theory.
Okay.
The 12 steps of a hero. It always starts off in the ordinary world. And I mean, you can go online and you can see a bunch of examples that use Star Wars, because it is one of the most popular examples, or even The Matrix, where it'll take the 12 steps of the hero's journey, chop it up, and be like, okay, this is the ordinary world. Like, for example, before he got called off to do fun lightsaber things, what was Luke doing?
Nothing.
Exactly. He was just a little farm boy, bored out of his gourd. And that's where that's the setting 0. Okay, the ordinary world, setting 0, first step. You have to be there. The second one is the call to action. And, once that hits, you're off to the races. And it goes through, you obviously the refusal to the call. Think The Matrix, when Neo is like, hey, I'm not going to do this. And then you meet the mentor. You finally take that first step into it. And it all culminates into the final, you come home a changed person, or you move on as a changed person. And most stories, they tend to follow that step, and it's mostly an unconscious thing. Joseph Campbell didn't have this entire thing laid out for everything that came before him for those people. If you read the Odyssey,
right,
the Iliad, I mean, it's just a subconscious human construct that every single story we tell, it always has the same archetype characters. It always has the same steps. The hero does this, and sometimes it might skip a step, and sometimes it might do a step again. But in the end, you pretty much have the entire system that Joseph Campbell wrote about. And you can take that all the way back to the myths, whether it's the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Sumerians, the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Yeah,
I mean, it has the steps, and it's just a subconscious human thing. Every single story you read, you can go to any high school, say, write a story. I want it to be long. Give me book length. They'll probably think you're crazy, but if you did that and you actually got them to do it, at the end of the day, all these teeny boppers would have books, and whether they were crazy stories or not, they would pretty much all have the same template. And it's just something that's ingrained in us.
I wonder if it is ingrained into us, or if naturally, or if it is ingrained to us just because it has been told so many times, throughout our history. There's so many stories that do take those steps.
Well, I mean, everything that we're exposed to, obviously, we pass on to our kids. I mean, it could just be a cultural memory thing. I mean, but back in the day when we had to do everything, tell all these stories orally instead of being able to write them down, I mean, they had to get it just right. And then once we started writing them down and we read them, I think, it could very well be a learned thing. I don't know if we can say it's one of those genetically implanted things in us, but then again, I might be getting off to Ancient Aliens, and that's a differently type of story. So.
Yeah, I mean, it may be not aliens, but I mean, like somehow, ingrained into our beings, because that kind of story has been told all around the world before those cultures ever even interacted with each other. And now that we're into cultures, stories obviously play an extremely important role in culture.
Indeed, they do.
And what I was getting at with the Star Wars thing was that, like, not to start talking about the new Star Wars, but they don't have that in whatever movie you may have seen that has the same effect, where that the story is not there anymore. There's no story there. There's no moral foundation, or not moral foundation, but there's no moral to the story. There's no point other than to put something out to bring money in. And
it's more of a, look what we did, guys. We put this on film and we added this kind of character and this kind of character. Give us your money. And that's all it is.
Right.
There's no, this is what happens. How does it play out? We know how it's going to play out. Just as soon as you show us the first trailer, it's like, well, one, you showed us all the highlights of the dang movie.
Right.
And two, it's pretty much just either a rehash or a regurgitation of some random idea, but it doesn't actually follow through with anything that's important. So you're right on the money on that.
Yeah, and then we also have, because obviously those films make a lot of money. One, because there's people like me who hate the new Star Wars, but went to see it anyway. Although I did watch 2 of them for free. So, but they'll pay anyway, just to see how it played out, just see how bad it is.
Right.
But you have even more people that actually enjoy these things, and I do enjoy a pointless movie. But when almost every movie becomes a pointless movie, it's a different story. And since we have now these people where it just matters that whatever's on the screen is fun and blah blah blah, it doesn't matter if the story's good. Which is literally what someone told me.
Oh.
And since stories do, like we agree, play such an important role in our culture and maintaining the culture that we do have and building more upon it, now that we have this trend, or if we have had it longer than, I'm just now realizing it, what impact that has had or, will have, if we can even speculate on that.
Okay, I want to put 2 thoughts out here. Basically, what we're seeing in the development of story in our culture is harkening back to the Egyptian times. We have the pyramids; they were great. We have the hieroglyphics; they were great. But then they start declining. It's as if going back to the Stargate issue, it's as if this civilization appeared overnight. It was perfect. It was already put in place. You don't have the rise up to hieroglyphics. It was just a writing form that was in place. But then it started deteriorating. And the construction styles, they started getting worse and worse. It was as if they were forgetting how to do it. And I say that because it's kind of like our same situation. We're going to see movies and we're going to see these different shows because of what we used to know. Like I'll watch a movie with my kids because this is a movie that I watched when I was a kid. I think you'll love it, guys, and they'll watch it. But if they remake it, I'll be like, hey, we have to go see this.
Right.
And then I'm sitting here and there's a knot in my stomach and I'm like, this is trash. But I'm gonna watch it with my kids because I remember going and watching this with my mom or my dad and my grandpa. So it's one of those, I'm going to do it because this is what happened when I was a kid and I want to pass that on to my kids. But it's almost as if the industry has caught on to that fact that, like, if we just crap on a piece of plate and put it in front of a camera, people are going to watch it because sentiment. So you have all these folks that they remember watching Star Wars with their older siblings or their parents. And then with each movie that comes out, now that we're older, we're going to try to do the same thing with our kids. And so they know that these stories don't have to be good, because now it's not about the story, it's about the experience. And it might be crap, but we're still paying for it.
Yeah.
And now, unfortunately, we're paying it in the long run because the story is crap. We get people who just rehash the same things over and over. I mean, I don't know if this is like an every year kind of thing, but like last year they said this is the year of movie remakes. Now they're saying the same thing about 2020. So we're just getting the same stuff over and over, and half of it isn't as good as the old stuff. So
no, it's not. If you do watch any reboots, the Jay and Silent Bob reboot was pretty good. I watched that last night.
I have not seen that yet.
It's pretty good, and it actually ties into the conversation that we're having, because the entire movie is making fun of the industry for making reboots and everything, and talking basically about like what we're saying, that it is just garbage that they put on a plate.
Well, the thing about the thing about Kevin Smith and them, they don't seem to be warped like a lot of Hollywood. When was the last time you saw Kevin Smith or any of the classic fringe actors like him? They speak their mind. Yeah. When was the last time you saw them get up there and do the horse and pony show for Golden Globes and all that fun stuff?
True. Well, and then they really don't put anything out anymore. Like one of my favorite groups were the Seth Rogen and James Franco and all them. And they always intended to make movies that went over the line, and I don't think they've put a movie out in a few years.
Well, I mean, who can anymore? Now everything's so damn politically correct. You can tell a story, but people will wonder, well, why didn't you include this in there? Why didn't you include that? Why did you put that in there? That shouldn't be in there. And when I do my stories, when I do my poetry, I do it to tell the damn story. I do it to get the feeling out there. And 9 times out of 10, if somebody reads my stuff, someone's probably going to be offended by it. And in fact, I'm surprised I haven't gotten fired over some of my stuff. I'm sure that day will come eventually. But now you can't do that when it comes to the professional films. You can't do that when it comes to the professional, I would say music, but music's a different score. The more offensive it is, the better, apparently.
Yeah, that's weird.
But in regards to films, and even in regards to books, you're not going to get anything out there unless you follow their formula, unless you include their agenda. And that's why I'm glad self-publishing is actually light years ahead of what it used to be even a decade ago. Because now guys like me can be like, okay, this is my story and I'm putting it out there. I don't have to pay anyone to put it out there. I don't have to beg someone to put it out there. It's out there. People are going to read it. It might not be a lot of people, but at least someone's going to listen to the story, read the story, listen to the poetry, read the poetry. I know a guy who does, he'll put his books out there, but then he'll also do his own recording of it so that he can put it on YouTube and then people can listen to it. I mean, he's all about getting the story out there. And I think at the end of the day, that's what most of us who do write want to do. You do have folks that are like, I want to be the next Stephen King.
Right.
Well, I want to be the guy that someone reads the story and gets something out of it. So,
yeah, let's switch over to the political side of it.
I don't know if that's wise.
Well, we're talking about, offending people, so might as well.
I stepped on that landmine.
But because you're talking about, you got to put stuff out that, or the industry control it. I already forgot what you said. But
and that's why I write, so that people can remember it. Right. Oh, page 2, this is what he spewed.
Oh, man, I'm doing a great job today.
Well, basically, what I had said was, the industry controls it. The elite of the elite control it. Look back at the last award ceremony. People were bitching and moaning that not enough people of this type won anything. Not enough of these movies were made. Not enough. Well, what do you want? People have to want to watch these movies. You can't create. It's supply and demand. The one thing that people always gripe, every single one of these highfalutin Hollywood types that they types, not kypes, types, they're all anti-gun. But every damn movie they're in involves shootouts and bombings, and I mean, it's all action. But they know they can't make a movie that's anti-gun because no one's going to watch it. People want to see this kind of thing. You don't want to watch some movie about an unarmed vegan detective, tracking down the mystery of the beef supply stealers. Nobody wants to watch that BS. You have to have a good story for people to want to watch it. A good idea. So the reason that people don't make those movies, because nobody really wants to watch them. You have to force that demographic. And it's just painful.
Yeah, well, and what you just said about that, because I can't believe I never realized this before, but those same people, that are anti-gun but playing action movies where there's so much shooting and killing, also say that, for example, Joaquin Phoenix's Joker movie, shouldn't have been made or whatever because it's going to cause violence or something. But if that's the case, then wouldn't their movies also do the same thing with gun violence? You could then turn around and say all of those action movies that you starred in, are contributing to all the gun violence that we have in America.
Right. It's just absurd.
It is.
I kept watching people bash the Joker, and it was nice. It was free publicity for the movie, and it actually turned out really well because a lot of normal folks, they loved the movie.
It was great.
They just showed that, they were shills. But the entire time they were bashing that, oh my God, people could take this movie the wrong way. There could be blood in the streets. They had the new Harley Quinn movie out. And I mean, the things that happened in that movie, even in the trailers, it's like way worse than anything I saw in the Joker trailer. So I don't know where their line of things are going to happen if people see this movie, as opposed to things are going to happen if people see this movie. It doesn't make sense. It's once they get on a topic, I think they're kind of like bulldogs. They just clamp down, try to shake it, and see what happens.
Yeah, this is like all of us regular people are too stupid to realize that they're movies.
Yeah.
Oh man. But so we have all these pointless movies with all that, and then you have the elites controlling, and most of those, if not all, tend to be leaning left.
Yes.
And then we have in so many movies, like the new Star Wars movie, and in comic books, I'm sure there's regular books. I feel like I remember something having to do with the Harry Potter series where they got, what's her name?
J.K. Rowling?
Yeah, to go back and say that someone was LGBT or something. I can't remember.
Yes, Dumbledore. Dumbledore was apparently a closeted wizard.
Yeah.
Which had absolutely no impact on the books whatsoever. You couldn't find it in the story. Apparently he was so closeted, there's absolutely no sliver of, hey, he might be gay in the books. But she's going to come back out and say, yeah, by the way, he's gay. He's gay. And then there's a funny skit online. I can't even remember who does it, but if you look, it's basically J.K. Rowling, someone playing J.K. Rowling, adding all these different things, ruining the series because the series belongs to her, not the people who read it. And on the one hand, I'm like, well, yeah, the writer is the one who would know, but if you're just making shit up that has nothing to do with canon, has absolutely no impact on the story, like if you say, by the way, this, and then someone can go back through it and be like, oh my God, that's right, I missed this Easter egg and this Easter egg, and he says this. I mean, that's right there. That's good writing. But just to say, well, I need to make this character this way so that I can get fans, and then it hurts more than it helps. they do that a lot with movies now too. It's you'll be watching a movie, it'll be a great movie. You'll be watching a television series, it'll be a great television series. But then out of nowhere, boom, LGBT character for no apparent reason in your face. You gotta love them. It's just a complete shift in the story. It's like, hey, we're having a super serious moment. This is the moment that you come out of the closet to us because we had no clue due to your haircut and the way you dress that you might be a little...
Right. And it wouldn't even be that... It also wouldn't be that bad if every time they did it, it didn't turn out to be like a huge focus point.
Right.
It's always got to be a focus point. Now, in the new Star Wars film, they did put a lesbian kiss in there. But it was so quick. Well, they say that they did that so they could cut it out for the Chinese audience. But it was, so quick. It was just a pan and then it happened and it was gone. And it wasn't a big focal point. Like a lot of fans apparently wanted Finn and Poe to be a gay couple, but that didn't happen, luckily. I don't think it's that big of an issue when they do it that. But yeah, when they make it a big focal point, for example, in one of the examples I used in the video that I put out, was the Steven Universe children's cartoon.
Ah, yes.
Now, I've never actually sat down and watched these episodes. I've seen a couple because they were on TV, and I think maybe my daughter was watching them or something. She will not watch them anymore. But the writer of it, said that one of the main things about it was to challenge gender and blah, blah, blah. And Steven and some girl that he's friends with apparently like kiss and morph into a single being or something that uses they them pronouns, and then they have a conversation with each other about questioning like if gender is even real or something like that. And it's like, why? To me, that's an obvious use of storytelling in media to push ideas and agendas into the brains of children.
Right, and it goes back to what I said with the quote from You've Got Mail. The things that we read as children stay with us a lot more and become a part of our identity. Well, why do you think they're getting rid of a lot of the old stuff? When you sit down in any English class now, it's probably all this new age contemporary stuff. Instead, all these new age contemporary writers instead of the classics, the things that we grew up reading, and even. The Great Gatsby came under fire recently. I can't remember everything that was said because I try not to listen to some of this stuff. But basically, what is the phrase? A bunch of dead white guys when they're talking about most literature from when we were growing up.
Yeah.
And I get that. William Shakespeare. You're reading Swift and Crusoe, Dickinson's. But the thing is, these are all great, great pieces of literature. And if you sit down and you're reading Great Expectations, you're getting things from that story that later on in life, it could play in the development of you as an individual. But now we're getting all this contemporary stuff that's just, in my honest opinion, broken. And they do it specifically so they can mold the people coming out, the kids. It's like, hey, read this story. There's nothing good about the story, but somewhere on page 60, you're introduced to this kind of lifestyle that you normally, wouldn't be introduced to.
Right.
It's social engineering.
Yeah, they have weaponized storytelling.
Yeah. And it's nothing short of what the Russians did. It's nothing short of what the Germans did. You can go back and read through a lot of stuff from pre-World War II, leading up to it, where the dehumanization of the Jews and the other quote-unquote undesirables,
right.
It leads people to believe certain things. And as long as they can control education, then they can control what that generation is going to act and be like. And that's why the Russians were always concerned about re-education. It's because they had to get people who they were still in the whole czar and imperial family mindset. Well, now we got to get them seeing things kind of red tinted. And it's nothing short of what they're doing today with these stories.
Yeah.
Like, hey, instead of I want to tell a story, and I want someone to read the story because it's a story that I have to tell. It's how can I put this in their face? How can I be obnoxious? How can I how can I get them to be forced this pile of manure? Well, actually, if I was that person, I'd be like, this wonderful plate of golden goodness. But it is a pile of manure. You can put all the whipped cream and a cherry on top, but it does make it a Sunday pie. So, yeah. To answer your question, it is weaponized more than a weapon.
Very much so. And, I mean, I guess to get a short answer to what impact that has, I assume we both agree that it's not a good thing.
No. I mean, if they kissed, in your Steven Universe example, if they kissed, they became one person, and they referred to themselves as they, them, and all that, that'd be fine. Because it's two individuals, two distinct personalities, in one body because of some sort of magical thing in this universe.
Right.
But then to start questioning, well, is everyone like that? Get out of here with that nonsense. You can't segue into that and make us buy it as a reasonable storytelling device. It's just a pointless piece of propaganda slid into the story. And yeah, it makes me sad that that's the kind of stuff that kids are exposed to. But what can you do?
Not much. Well, don't let them watch it. Monitor what they're watching at home.
Well, true.
You can't always do that, but
well, it's becoming a lot more predominant. You know, they're sliding it into this show. They're sliding it into that show. I don't think there's one popular television series now that doesn't have some sort of reference to it at all.
True. That's why, before this was a big thing, but when I grew up, I watched more anime than I did cartoons. One, because almost all anime is, an overarching story, while American cartoons they do this in this episode, this in that episode, and this in that episode. And there's more of a story told. Cartoons in Japan are more for storytelling than they are in America. And I actually have my daughter watch anime more than she watches cartoons. Unfortunately, it's because she's hooked on the awesome fights. But I'm trying to, get her to understand what the point of the story was and all of that. For children, never mind. I was just going to go into a tangent about how you should probably have your children watch more anime than American cartoons so they can get, good values instilled. I mean, there are a few animes that have some of that liberal stuff in them, but not many.
Yes, Trevor, that's exactly where we want to go here. It's like, hey, remember how in the 40s we were fighting them? Now we want our children to watch their stuff to get their education.
Well, here's the difference that we're getting into Japan is they have since then they have adopted our culture, and then not completely, but their culture is completely different than then.
I make light of it, but honestly, during the whole Fukushima catastrophe, I think they showed us a thing or two about where our culture has gone wrong. We had Katrina, and they were killing each other over pairs of shoes. They were rushing the relief trucks. I mean, cops were looting. And in Japan, they had old people volunteering. The sick, the infirm, they were volunteering for cleanup duty. They were volunteering for a lot of the dangerous stuff because they didn't want the younger men, the younger women to be exposed to the radioactive material. And when they went to the relief trucks and they went to relief centers, they only took what they needed. It's like, hey, here's a bag of food, some bottles of water, done. They got out of line, walked away. Here, I mean, it was chaos. I mean, I don't know if you remember watching any of that, but
I was young.
It was rough. It was, I think, my freshman year at University of Evansville, we had a couple folks that their families were displaced by Katrina. and they were telling horror stories, sitting in class, like, you wouldn't believe this. And I knew one individual who was actually in, is it the Astrodome or whatever it was, where they started shipping people over in Texas, trying to give them a place for relief. And I mean, it was horrible. It was worse than some of these refugee camps that we keep getting we're getting told that they're concentration camps, but as opposed to what was happening back during Katrina. I mean, they're like spas, they're retreats. People were defecating just outside their little sleeping bag tents, and there were rapes, robberies. It was horrible, and you don't get any of those stories from over in Japan. So in a lot of ways, we still have a lot to learn.
Yeah. Well, okay. And so let's talk about one final subject, which that goes into. But next weekend, I will be having a conversation with someone about religion. And like I mentioned in my video, I think religion, I mean, to me, they're all stories. I'm pretty sure you have an opposing viewpoint on that. But
most likely. Yeah.
Either way, I think we both agree it's the most impactful stories, whether they're true or not, in history, no matter which religion it is to that group. And that cultural difference between us and Japan, I wonder is if it has anything to do with it. Because they were, before that, I think the whole country, it was a Shinto country. Mm-hmm. And over here we're however many different hundreds of Christianity and now whatever else we have. And if that plays, I'm sure it does, plays a huge role.
I actually think it does, and I just broke my foot on your chair, but I'm going to move on. I think it does. When you have a mindset that's set around you have to treat your children with a certain amount of respect because your parents treated you with a certain amount of respect, and you have to keep taking care of your parents because they took care of you, which is in the Japanese mindset. They don't have our, I'm going to call it uber freedom. We're so uber individualistic that I don't want to say we don't care about others, but it's gotten to the point where it makes you wonder, as soon as our...
Yeah, I would absolutely say that is a big thing now.
I mean, it's as Americans, I know a lot of people say that our biggest flaw is arrogance. I mean, we earned that, so I'm not but I honestly think our biggest flaw is we embrace freedom to the degree that it is counterintuitional. As soon as our parents get so old, the majority of us throw them in nursing homes. If our kids are running around being too loud, which is, we throw them in schools. We celebrate the fact that they're going to school so that we don't have to deal with them. And I'm saying we is a generalization.
Right.
Not all of us agree with that, but unfortunately, a lot of people see it that way. Everyone's focus is me, me, me. In Japan, it's more of a family. It's if they treated their parents or if they treated their children the way that we treat our parents, children, our neighbors, they would view it with such a degree of dishonor that they would actually become sick about it. And I've read articles where people are like that, where they feel like they've shamed their family, and so it's pretty much ruining their life. They could be out there living what we would view as the dream. They got lots of money, they got a great job, but if they feel like they've dishonored their family, they're not enjoying it like we would. And you do the same thing with an American just probably wouldn't give a shit.
No.
And culturally, with religion, we can also say the same thing about how we treat everything around us. You can drive down any road out here, even out in the country, and you're going to see litter everywhere. Everything from cigarette butts to pop bottles, soda wrappers, anything. And I think that goes back to we don't treat nature as sacred. In Japan, they have the idea of the kami, which are the spirits of nature, the spirits of And I don't want to say I'm a Shinto expert because I just know a couple basic phrases of this and that. I'm probably butchering it, so I'm very sorry. But we just throw our garbage out willy-nilly. Well, way back in the day when we had the Greco-Roman religions and when the West was polytheistic, we probably wouldn't have done that, because what if we were upsetting the spirit that lived there, or the spirit of this grove, or the deity that favored this area? We wouldn't have done that. And I think our problem comes from, oh God, I can't remember it. The story where someone was sailing, some Roman, and he heard someone call out, "Tell the world the great god Pan is dead." Well, Pan was the god of nature, and it seems from that everything went downhill, because we just treat nature like a whore instead of trying to keep it and maintain it. And so, in comparison, the Japanese, who still have some cultural sense of ideas that nature is sacred because that's how it's always been, you're not going to see that over there. Long story for your small question.
All right. Thank you.
Hey, not a problem. My pleasure.